Hey there and welcome. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to use linking words of contrast. Though, although, even though, however, despite, and in spite of. There are lots of examples to help you understand, and I have also included useful vocabulary words and phrases, so make sure to watch the full lesson. All right, let's begin. As I said in the introduction, the words we are discussing in this lesson, although, however, despite, etc., are used to express contrast, that is, to show how two ideas are opposite to each other. Let's take a simple example. I invited Maya to my wedding, she didn't come. Here we have two sentences. The first sentence gives us an expectation. I have a friend or a colleague named Maya. When I say, I invited Maya to my wedding, what do you expect? You expect that she must have come to the wedding. But then I say, she didn't come. So this result is surprising or unexpected. The idea in the second sentence is opposite to the idea in the first sentence. We call that contrast, and to express this contrast clearly, we can do this. I invited Maya to my wedding, but she didn't come. The word but is the simplest contrast word. It's very easy. Instead of but, we have some other options like although. Although I invited Maya to my wedding, she didn't come. Notice here that although is used to set up the expectation. It's added to the sentence that gives us the expectation. The advantage with although is that you can rearrange the parts of the sentence. So you can say, Maya didn't come to my wedding, although I invited her. Here the result is presented first and the expectation comes second. This adds focus to that expectation, but it means the same thing. You cannot do this sort of rearranging with the word but, so although gives you a little more flexibility in how you can arrange your sentences. So what about though and even though? Well, they mean the same thing as although. Although is the base word. Though is a shortened form. We drop the letters AL to make though. Since it's a shortened form, though is informal. We use it more in speech than in writing. Even though is a stronger form of although. It adds emphasis to what you're saying. Even though I invited Maya to my wedding, she didn't come. That shows you that I'm disappointed. This next sentence shows you that I'm really disappointed. Maya didn't come to my wedding even though I invited her. So remember that although is the base word, though is informal, and even though is stronger and adds emphasis. But all three of these words mean the same thing. Let's talk about however now. It has the same meaning as but. For example, I can say, I invited Maya to my wedding. However, she did not attend it. This sentence is similar to the previous examples, but notice that I've said did not instead of the short form didn't. Also, I've used the more formal word attend. That's because however is a formal word. In fact, in this wedding situation, however is not a good fit because in spoken language, we don't often use however. It's more common in writing. So let's look at an example of written language using however. To understand the example, you will need 4 vocabulary items. The first is epidemic. This means a situation in which a disease spreads rapidly, that is, fast, and infects a large number of people. Some examples are cholera epidemic, a flu epidemic, a typhoid epidemic, etc. The second word is outbreak. This refers to the sudden start of a disease. In our example, the outbreak of the epidemic. Next is succumb. The B at the end is silent, so it's pronounced succumb. This is a more formal, more academic word, which means to die from a disease. So if a person succumbs to a particular disease, then they die because of that disease. And finally, the last item is to contain an outbreak, disease, or epidemic. This simply means to stop a disease from spreading. Usually this is done by government health agencies. Once they have stopped the spread of a disease, they will announce that it has been contained. So here's our sentence now. There are reports that 10 more people have succumbed to the epidemic this week. However, the government continues to insist that the outbreak has been contained. So there are reports, meaning that the media, the press is saying that 10 more people have succumbed to the epidemic. That is, 10 more people have died from the disease this week. So this is an ongoing epidemic. It says 10 more people, so that's in addition to the people who died previously. Now the second sentence presents a contrasting idea. However, the government continues to insist, that is, the government still says strongly that the outbreak has been contained. Government officials are saying that they have stopped the spread of the disease. So the writer is claiming here that maybe the government is not telling the truth. They're trying to cover up to hide the fact that the disease is still spreading. So you can see that, however, has a much more formal feel around it. Of course, we can also use our old friend but. Notice that the word but has taken the place of however here, or although. Although there are reports that 10 more people have succumbed to the epidemic this week, the government continues to insist that the outbreak has been contained. If we want to indicate a strong contrast, we can use even though instead of although. Now, looking at these sentences, it's clear to me that however is the best choice here. Can you say why? Well, but and although combine two sentences into a single sentence. In this case, that results in a huge sentence that you have to read from start to finish and keep all that information in your mind. But the word however is not a conjunction. It's an adverb. It doesn't combine two sentences. Notice in the example with however, we have one sentence first, then there's a period or full stop. The reader can stop, take a breath, and digest that information and then move on to the next sentence. That next sentence neatly starts with however, so the reader knows they're going to find the opposite idea to the first one. So however is part of the second sentence. Being part of a sentence means that however is very flexible. You can put it in the middle like this. The government, however, continues to insist that the outbreak has been contained. Note that two commas separate however from the rest of the sentence. It can also come at the end. The government continues to insist that the outbreak's been contained, however. These placements are all perfectly acceptable. You cannot do this with but or although. Alright, let's turn now to the last topic, despite and in spite of. Before I tell you how these are used, just know that they both mean the same thing. Despite is the same as in spite of, so you can use them interchangeably, meaning that you can choose whichever one you want to use. Let's take an example to understand these words. Silvio made up his mind to buy the expensive house even though his wife objected to it. Objected means that she said, "No, don't buy the house, it's too expensive." But did Silvio listen? No. He really liked it, so he made up his mind. That is, he made the decision to buy the house, and he wasn't going to change that decision. Now to me, the second clause, even though his wife objected to it, sounds a little long. I want to shorten it, so I'm going to write it like this. Silvio made up his mind to buy the expensive house despite his wife's objections. Now what's the difference between the two sentences? Notice that after even though or although, we have a complete sentence. His wife objected to it. This is a full sentence with a subject and a verb. We call that an independent clause, but that just means it's a complete sentence. But after despite, we just have his wife's objections. The main word here is objections, a noun. So his wife's objections is a noun phrase. That is, the main word is a noun, and the other words, his and wife's, are just giving us information about that noun. So the rule is, after though, although, or even though, you have to put a full sentence. But after despite or in spite of, you have to have either a noun phrase or an ing verb. That's another option. Like this. Carmela took a job in Mexico City despite having little knowledge of Spanish. Having little knowledge of Spanish is a verb phrase with an ing verb, having. Of course, in both sentences, you can use in spite of in the place of despite, in spite of his wife's objections, in spite of having little knowledge of Spanish, and the meaning would be the same. With despite and in spite of, you can rearrange the clauses. Despite his wife's objections, Silvio made up his mind to buy the expensive house. Despite having little knowledge of Spanish, Carmela took a job in Mexico City. These are perfectly acceptable. So remember that if you want to use a word of contrast with a noun phrase or an ing verb phrase, then you use despite or in spite of. With although or even though, you have to put a full sentence after them. All right, now we're going to take all this knowledge and apply it to some more situations. We'll take some more examples and we'll go through them one by one. You will also learn some useful vocabulary. All right, I've got a Microsoft Word document open here, and we're going to discuss 6 examples. Now, I will make this document available for you to download through a link in the description. So after you watch this lesson, make sure to go and get this document, and you can review it in your own time. All right, here's the first situation. John's parents wanted him to be a doctor. John had his mind set on making it big as a pop singer. Now, before we talk about how to connect these two sentences using words of contrast, let's take a look at a couple of vocabulary items that you will need for this. To have one's mind set on something means to be determined to do or to have something. And to make it big means to become very successful. So here in this second sentence over here, John had his mind set on making it big as a pop singer means that John was determined to become a successful pop singer. All right, now I want you to stop the video and think about how you would connect these two sentences using but, though, although, even though, however, and in spite of, and despite. Stop the video, write out your sentences, then play the video and continue. All right, let's look at the answers. But is quite easy. John's parents wanted him to be a doctor, but he had his mindset on making it big as a pop singer. I'm sure you got that one right. With though, although, and even though, we have a couple of options. The first is to do this. Although his parents wanted him to be a doctor, John had his mindset on making it big as a pop singer. So you say although, and then the first clause, the expectation, and then you follow that up with the second clause, the result. Now here, I want to share with you a common error that many people make. Now many people write the first clause correctly with although, but then they add a but and then present the result. You can't do that. You can only use one of them. You can use although or you can use but not both in the same sentence. So I'm just going to strike that one out. Remember that. The second option is to reverse the order of the clauses. So I have the result first here, and then although, and then the clause that has the expectation. That's also fine. Now obviously, instead of although, in both of these options, you can write though or even though, and that would also be correct. However is also quite straightforward. John's parents wanted him to be a doctor. However, he had his mindset on making it big as a pop singer. And you probably wrote it like this. But there is a better option. You remember I told you that you can place however at different points in a sentence? So here's how I wrote it. John's parents wanted him to be a doctor. He, however, had his mindset on making it big as a pop singer. I really like this placement of however because it nicely highlights the contrast between what John's parents want and what he wants. So I really like writing it this way. Now with in spite of and despite, we have a problem here because we don't have a noun phrase or an ing verb phrase in the original sentence. So you have to write it like this. Despite the fact that his parents wanted him to be a doctor, John had his mindset on making it big as a pop singer. So despite the fact that allows you, it's a phrase, and this phrase allows you to write the first clause as it is, as a full sentence. So in this way, it's just like although. So if I scroll up here, You see here we've said, although his parents wanted him to be a doctor. So although plus a full sentence. And here we've got the exact same form, despite the fact that, and then a full sentence. So you will see this form a lot, especially in writing, with despite the fact that. You can also say in spite of the fact that, and that would mean the same thing. And just like with although, you can reverse the order of the clauses, and that is also correct. Now, out of all the options that we have here, my favorite for this particular situation is this one over here. I'm going to give it a star, and I'm going to highlight it because I feel that out of all of these sentences, this one does a very good job of highlighting the contrast. So this is my pick, even though all of the others are also grammatically correct. All right, let's move on to example number 2. Here's the situation. The cheetah is the fastest land animal on earth. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the cheetah can only run at top speed for about 30 seconds. Stop the video, write out your sentences, and then check. All right, the sentence with but is very easy. First clause, but, and then the second clause. Now, in this situation though, this doesn't give us enough contrast. So what you can do is use although or even though. Although the cheetah is the fastest land animal on earth, it can only run at top speed for about 30 seconds. Sounds like something you might hear on National Geographic. Now, you can also reverse the order of the clauses, but when I read it, I felt that even though worked the best if you reverse the order, which is why I've put even though here, but there's nothing wrong if you want to use although. When writing with however, I wanted to point this out in the first example as well. Remember to write the first clause and then put a period or a full stop and end that sentence and then start the next sentence with however using a capital H. Now, however also works nicely in this sentence because this is sort of a formal academic context and however fits in there very well. With in spite of and despite, it's really interesting because these words work very well here. Here's how I wrote them. Despite being the fastest land animal on earth, the cheetah can only run at top speed for 30 seconds. Notice that I've said despite being. So what I've done is I've taken the main verb, the cheetah is the fastest land animal. So is a form of the verb be. I've made being by adding ing to that verb. And I've said despite being fastest land animal on earth. Always remember that this is an option. You can say despite or in spite of, that's also correct, plus an ing verb. Again, you can reverse the order of the clauses and put the clause with despite after the first clause. Now, out of all these options, my picks are as follows. I like this one with although or even though. However is also something that works well here, as I said, and despite plus the ing form. So these three are all equally good. You can use any one of them and they work well. All right, let's go on to example number 3 now. Here's the situation, a simple one. I've looked for my glasses everywhere. I can't find my glasses. Go ahead and write the sentences. All right, just by looking at these, you should be able to tell that this is an informal conversational situation, and the best option is the simple word but. In fact, I'm going to star it right away. I've looked for my glasses everywhere, but I can't find them. It's simple and it works perfectly. Now, I will show you the others, but I'm not going to read them out. I'm going to make some comments though. If you're going to use though, although, or even though, the word though works best because it's more informal and conversational. But these two, however, and despite and in spite of, they sound very unnatural, so I'm actually going to strike them out. They are grammatically correct, but we would never say these in conversation, so you don't want to go and talk like this. Even these two sentences sound somewhat unnatural, but they're not too bad, so I'm going to leave them as is. But like I said, for this type of conversational situation, but is the best option. All right, we go on to example number 4 now. Here's the situation. You will need some vocabulary for this, but I will go over that in a moment. There is a proliferation of mobile phones, tablets, and e-readers. Research shows that sales of print books are actually on the rise. The word proliferation means a great increase in the number or amount of something. So there is a proliferation of mobile phones means that there's been a great increase in the use of these devices. The phrase on the rise also means increasing, but this is an adjective. So research shows that sales of print books are actually on the rise. So the contrast here is there's a proliferation of these devices, so you expect that nobody reads print or paper books anymore. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, unexpectedly, research shows that people are buying print books more and more these days. All right, write out the sentences and then check. All right, you notice that I don't have the option of the word but listed here. That's because I felt it doesn't really work well in this sort of academic context. But you can use although or even though. You know the form already by now, so I'm not going to read it out. Although, and then the first clause, which gives us the expectation, and then the second clause, which gives us the result. With however, again, you know the form. First clause, period or full stop, and then the second clause beginning with however, but I actually have a problem with this here. Because notice this first clause, there is a proliferation of mobile phones, tablets, and e-readers. It sounds like we're announcing this to the reader as if they don't know this information already. So this doesn't sound very professional, and I'm going to strike it out. I wouldn't use this. The words in spite of and despite work very well. The focus of this first clause, which gives us the expectation, is the noun proliferation. Remember that after despite or in spite of, you can't put a noun phrase. So here's how I wrote it. Despite the proliferation of mobile phones, tablets, and e-readers, research shows that sales of print books are on the rise. This is okay, this is good, but we can make this sound better by removing this bit over here that research shows, and we can put that right in the beginning. Research shows that despite the proliferation of mobile phones, tablets, and e-readers, sales of print books are actually on the rise. That sounds pretty good. You can also reverse the order of the clauses, but I've told you that I like this one a lot, and I'm going to star and highlight it like that. This to me is the best option here. Okay, onward to example number 5. Here's the situation. There have been a slew of recent accidents in the factory. The management has yet to introduce any new safety measures. The expression a slew of means a large number or amount of something. We use it with nouns like accidents or problems, a slew of accidents, a slew of problems. Those are a couple of negative uses, but you can also use this expression positively. For example, there's a new phone out packed with a slew of features. Means it has a lot of features. Or I might say, my latest YouTube video got a slew of positive comments. Of course, you can also say negative comments, but that hasn't been the case for me so far. Knock on wood. All right, so the contrast here is there have been a lot of accidents in the factory. Still, the management has yet to introduce, meaning the management has not yet introduced any new safety measures to protect the workers. All right, write out the sentences. Okay, the forms of but, although, and however you know very well by now, so I'm not going to belabor them. You can stop the video and you can read them if you want, although I'm sure you got all of them correct. Where I want to focus is in spite of and despite. Notice once again that in the original sentence, the focus is the noun slew. So you can use despite or in spite of. You can do this. Despite a slew of recent accidents in the factory, the management has yet to introduce any new safety measures. Now I want to show you another form that you will often see with despite, and that's this. There have been a slew of recent accidents in the factory. Despite this, the management has yet to introduce any safety measures. This is a nice way of expressing a strong contrast. Notice that in this use, despite is acting very much like however. Despite this, the management refuses to introduce safety measures. You can also say in spite of this. It means the same thing, and this is actually my pick for this situation. All right, let's move on now to the final example, example number 6. There's a lot of vocabulary to discuss here. Many young people have dreams of being successful entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur is a person who starts his or her own business. Few are prepared for the long hours. The long hours means that you might, as a business person, you might have to work not just 9 to 5, but beyond that as well for many hours every day. The financial uncertainty means you can't be sure. So 1 month your business might generate a profit, another month it might incur a loss. So few are prepared for the long hours, the financial uncertainty, and the myriad unforeseen challenges. The word myriad means a great number of something. It's just like the phrase that we looked at previously, a slew of. So myriad is a great number. Unforeseen means not expected or predicted. The myriad unforeseen challenges are the many unexpected challenges that are part and parcel of the self-employed lifestyle. Self-employed means you work for yourself as a business person, and part and parcel means included in something, cannot be separated from something. So all of these challenges are part and parcel of being a business person, and few young people are actually prepared for all of these challenges. That is the contrast. All right, stop the video, write out your answers, then play the video and continue. All right, using but is easy here. As with the other examples, just the first clause, but, and the second clause. Pretty easy. With although and even though, this example is a little different from the ones we've looked at previously, because if you read these two sentences over here, you'll notice that we cannot say that one is an expectation and the other is an unexpected result. These two are just opposites. So you can actually add although or even though to either one. You can put although here, or you can put although over here, like this. So you see here, we said, although many people have dreams of being successful entrepreneurs, few are prepared for the long hours, the financial uncertainty, and all the other challenges. But you can also do this. Many young people have dreams of being successful entrepreneurs, although few are prepared for the long hours, etc. Both of these are okay. With however, again, you have a couple of options. You either put the first clause as a sentence on its own, end it with a period, and start the second clause with however, or you can say, many young people have dreams of being successful entrepreneurs. Few, however, are prepared for all the challenges. This is also fine, and this actually highlights the contrast nicely. Now, if you tried to write these two sentences with in spite of or despite, then you may have run into trouble because there isn't a clear noun phrase or an ing verb here. So you would have had to say despite the fact that, and then a certain clause, and that would have made the whole thing look quite unwieldy and very long and awkward. So for that reason, I have not included in spite of and despite here. I suggest that with long, large sentences like this, you avoid the use of those expressions and use something simple like however. In fact, I'm going to star and highlight this because I think this is simple and captures the spirit of the sentence very well. So this is my pick. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson and learned a lot from it. As always, happy learning, and I will see you in another lesson soon.